Welcome to week 3 of the Absolute Basics of Christianity. I'm Pastor Pete, and this week we are going to be talking about the church. We're going to talk about who the church is, what the church is, why you should go to church. You're going to look at some interesting statistics about church in week 4, and we're just going to make a case for church. Why church is important, why God ordained the church, and all of those things. But before you start, you should know something about me. I haven't always liked church. When I was growing up, I used to try to find any excuse possible to get out of church. I grew up on a farm and ranch, and when I got old enough to actually decide, when I was a kid, my mom always took us to church, but my father wasn't a Christian, and he wasn't active in his faith at all, and we didn't have to go to church because Dad didn't go to church. And so while Mom took us while we were little, when we got old enough to go with Dad and we got old enough to make our own decisions about church, I didn't go. I would rather go work on the farm. I'd rather go shovel hog manure, which is what we did on Sundays, or ship hogs or work cattle or whatever. Not because it was fun, but just because I didn't really particularly care that much for church. But something changed. I began to like church, and I had a guy tell me one time, he said, well, of course, Pastor, of course you love church. A drug dealer says that drugs should be legal, and a pimp says that prostitution is a good thing. Of course, a pastor is going to say, church is a good thing, and everybody should go. You're biased towards it. Let me tell you something. I fell in love with church long before I was a pastor. I fell in love with church long before God called me into the ministry. I fell in love with church my junior year of high school, and that love has just grown throughout the years. And even though God called me several years later, I have always been active in a church. Ever since that time, I have really always desired and wanted to be active in a church, because church is important. When I go to church, it refreshes me, it renews me, it helps me grow, it gives me significance in life. It lets me bring my gifts and talents to the table, and I'm just able to use my little bitty humbling gifts and talents, and I put them in with a group of other people at the church, and God does amazing things with them. I can do far more with the people in the church than I can do on my own. And God created us to live in relationship, and so when I go to church, I fulfill that need in my life, and it just all around, it makes life so much better to be in church. But a lot of people can't understand that and still don't understand that. Because you're doing this study, because you've made it to week 3, which I know may not sound that significant in the context of a 13-week or a 26-week study if you plan to do both volumes of the Absolute Basics of Christianity, but because you've made it this far and because you're doing the study at all, I know that you are probably active in a church. But maybe you've just started getting active in a church. Maybe you don't really love church, but you're just kind of doing church because you think it's important. Well, you're going to learn this week that it is important, and I pray that you'll see just how important it is, and it will help you fall in love with church. When we talk about church this week, we're not talking about showing up twice a month or once a month. We're not talking about coming at Christmas and Easter. We're not talking about coming when it's convenient. We're talking about making church a high priority in our life, and not just that we go to church, but that you are involved in church. If you want to get the most out of church, you need to be involved. And God has you in your local church for a reason and for a purpose. And that is so that you would get involved, and so that your gifts and your talents and your abilities would be used for the kingdom of God. And the only way that happens is if you get involved. So even if you're going to church, if you're not involved in church, I hope that by the end of this week, you'll say, man, I need to plug in and get involved with my church wherever you are. Enjoy the study. Again, look up all the scriptures, memorize the memory verses, answer all the questions. Let me know if you have any questions, and if I can help you in any way, I surely will. And I hope that you get a lot out of this study this week as you study the church. We'll be talking to you soon.